We will get the Smart City data session started from now. I will introduce the session moderator, Professor Jae-ho Kim from Sejong University. He is the Associate Professor of Department of Electronics and Information Engineering at Sejong University. He uses to serve as Chair of IoT and Smart City Platform of Telecommunications Technology Association since, and was the Director in Autonomous IoT Research Center at Korea Electronic Technology Institute from 2000 to 2020. Then, I will ask Professor Jae-ho Kim to proceed with the Smart City data session from now. Thank you.
Hello, I am Jae-ho Kim from Sejong University, the moderator of this Smart City data session. In this session, we'll have broad discussion of technical aspects to make a city smarter. And this session is currently being aired on the YouTube channel, and we are also receiving questions in real time. We look forward to hearing from you. I'd like to inform you in advance that the presentations made by the UK speakers today are video recorded taken by broadcasting staff in the UK due to the quarantine situation. But the Korea speakers presentation will be held in real time at the Gyeongwonje venue in Songdo, Incheon in Korea. Okay. In addition, Korean and UK speakers, panelists expect to participate in online discussion in real time. Okay, first let me introduce today's speakers. We'll be grateful if you could say hello on the screen. Okay, first of all, I'd like to introduce the Chief Digital Officer, Theo Blackwell, Greater London Authority as a British speaker. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Next, I'd like to introduce Paul McConnell, the head of Arup Digital Studio Team, a global engineering company.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Hello. The next, I'd like to introduce Kyung-Jun Lee, is the project manager of SK Telecom as a Korean speaker. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Jung-woo Ha, the head of the Naver AI. At the end of this session, David Coco, head of digital sector of BSI Group, the UK's national standard body, will be in charge of the panel discussion and the subject of the presentation. Each presenter will be take about 15 and 20 minutes. Okay, to start with, let's watch the presentation by the Chief Digital Officer of Greater London Authority, Theo Blackwell. He was appointed in 2017 as London's first Chief Digital Officer to lead on the London-wide digital transformation, data and smart city initiatives at City Hall. Today, you will be giving a presentation under the title of Next Steps in Making London a Smarter City.
Hello, my name's Theo Blackwell. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for London, and it's a great pleasure to come to be able to present to you virtually at this Smart Cities Symposium. And I'm going to take you through some slides entitled Making London a Smarter City. So first, I'd like to set out a short smart history of London going back 2 decades. When the Greater London Authority was created in the year 2000 as a new form of regional government in London, it created Transport for London, our regional transport authority, and that has been a great source of innovation and smart city initiatives in London. It started off with creating the congestion charge, which of course in 2003 was a smart city initiative using cameras and data on vehicle license plates in order to reduce congestion in the city. It also introduced the Oyster card for easy payment for passengers on the tube, reducing queues and giving people greater flexibility. In 2010, we created an open data platform, one of the first of its kind to bring together government and local government data sets to improve transparency and improve decision making, especially around planning and strategic growth of the city. Later on, contactless travel arrived, again an initiative from Transport for London. And contactless travel enabled people to move around the tubes, get in and out of the underground quicker and faster, gave people more choice, and it helped popularise contactless payment through its adoption on the tube for the rest of society as well. In 2016, we started a programme funded by the European Union, piloting smart city initiatives, linking with other European cities so we could learn from one another on e-mobility, on building retrofit and energy saving. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has driven forward civic innovation challenges, our form of open calls, and we've introduced the low emission zone based upon the congestion charge to improve air quality and started trials of connected autonomous vehicles in the Olympic Park and Greenwich. We've also created new institutions, the London Office of Technology and Innovation and the Transport Innovation Team in Transport for London. These new units and teams are able to think outside of the box, so above traditional bureaucracies, and think about future prototyping in London. Now, part of my job, being appointed 3 years ago, was to create a new roadmap for London. And as the officer charged for strategic digital transformation, innovation and smart city thinking, I set out 5 missions for us to achieve based on a listening exercise, the largest of its kind in London's history, about what people wanted from technology and what people thought about its civic uses. And they told us that we had to get the basics right, what I call fixing the plumbing. But technology also had to put people first. And that was a challenge, perhaps, to traditional smart city thinking, which can be characterised sometimes as solutionist. So we established common digital principles early off. These principles were also shared and explained to our civic leadership as well, so they understood what digital leadership was for the city. We created those new teams and institutions, London Office of Technology and Innovation. We developed those open call approaches. Now we're looking to develop an emerging tech charter to set out the guidelines on the deployment of emerging tech. And we're moving towards a new city data platform, which I'll turn to later on in the presentation. So first to user design services, and I mentioned this as one of the first things that we did. So we introduced immediately a new governance for all digital data and technology projects at City Hall based on the government service standard, which had yet to have been applied in a municipal setting. So that's the GDS standard, which emphasises agile and user-centred design. We undertook service reviews on our city digital services to retrofit them, make suggestions on how they could be more user-centred where they weren't designed like that. We launched new platforms that were citizen-facing, focusing on the dynamic interaction with the citizens, such as Crowdfund London, which enables local communities to raise funds for identify community projects they need to raise funds for, and will match fund it if they reach a certain target. We've raised £3 million that way for everything from local cafes, community centres, community gardens, local cinemas and discos for young people. So grassroots led. And we've also redesigned the Talk London platform, which is our platform with over 60,000 London citizens as users now, so we could talk to them about changes in the city. And that platform has proved invaluable during the current pandemic crisis. We emphasised collaboration, as I set out at the beginning. And so chief of this is what we call LOTI, the London Office of Technology and Innovation. This new team of people, which is but 5 strong, is focused relentlessly on design and data sharing and spinning up projects between the parts of London that hitherto hadn't worked together. So London being federated across 32 boroughs, each has its own independent technology record, which has hampered our ability to scale great ideas. So LOTI acts as a convening force so that we can pilot ideas not just in 1 borough, but in 4 boroughs or 8 boroughs or 20 boroughs. That means that we can think about smart cities not as a collection of expensive pilots dotted around the city, but something with consistency and commonality. Key work projects for LOTI, like reflecting some of our work at City Hall, have been on fixing the plumbing in year 1. This has meant thought about the governance around data sharing, the creation of a common platform for technology procurement, so that for the first time we have full knowledge of the collective technology estate that sits behind public services that people and other public servants experience on a day-to-day basis. This openness means that we can understand our technology mix and take steps to change it in the ways that we deem necessary, including reducing our reliance on big IT suppliers and putting more emphasis on scale-ups. We've also done deep dives during the crisis into vulnerability, because the crisis really showed us how vulnerable some of our citizens were. So we were able to collect that data consistently from all parts of London to give us fuller and deeper and more actionable insights into how to tackle the crisis for those who need their help the most. In the future, we'll be working on Internet of Things projects, especially in the field of social care, and further open calls. Now, the opportunity presented to us by the open call approach, I think, is really, really important and marks a step change under the mayoralty of Sadiq Khan. Hitherto, you might have gathered from my presentation that we had a lot of initiatives driven by Transport for London on a London-wide level, applying to everyone, but at quite a lot of scale. What happens about those smart city initiatives that don't need to apply to everyone, that we instead want to prototype and feel our way and iterate with London citizens? So we found the open call approach through the Mayor's Civic Innovation Challenge to be especially useful, because it opens up the opportunity, not for one size fits all, but for co-design and iteration in our search for solutions to civic problems. So the launch of the Civic Innovation Challenge in the first year saw 7 challenges co-written and backed, not just by public service agencies such as Transport for London, but also private sector agencies like Lloyds Banking Group and the National Grid. We had 120 applications from small tech firms from across the sector, and we invested 50 hours in co-design before we went to the competition phase. And although there were 3 winners, the learning that we had as public sector bodies, engaging with small tech organisations and vice versa, was invaluable. In fact, I'd say the process opening people's eyes to the art of the possible if you like, was almost as important as the outcome. But nevertheless, we had some really, really good winners of this prize. The most notable of which, I'd say, would be the Go Jauntly app, which worked with Transport for London and used data that organisations normally wouldn't have access to create an app on healthy walks around London. So it solved Transport for London's problem of providing another opportunity in the transport mix for citizens, and it helped develop this app through access to data that would normally not be available. This app is now available to all Londoners and developed in 2018, and actually is something that people really enjoy on a day-to-day basis, especially important when people are looking for walks as lockdown restrictions eased. Now, one of London's mainstays as a smart city has been the London Data Store, which I mentioned in the introduction. It was established in 2010, rebuilt in 2014, broadening its group of publishers. It started off with around 600 data sets, which broadly speaking supported London government's core function of strategic planning. Currently, the London Data Store has over 6,000 data sets supporting planning, environment, economic analysis, and general policy development. But often when we talk about smart city data platforms, we concentrate on the volume of data rather than what it's used for. And this is what I call our development of a purpose-led approach. We don't want to be a city that just merely aggregates lots of data. You need to put that data in front of data analysts and domain experts, and often civil society, and anyone who can make a difference, in order to meet the objectives that you've set out. So while we've made great progress on infrastructure mapping in the city, such as understanding our green canopy across the city, understanding our cultural infrastructure, often hidden cultural infrastructure in the city, and our construction infrastructure that enables firms to work together to do works all at once rather than creating multiple moments of congestion. All of that infrastructure mapping has been made available through the sharing of open data and also closed commercial data. We're beginning to understand our underground assets through work with the National Government's Geospatial Commission, and we're about to put all of our planning and development data in a live feed on an open API so that innovation can flourish around our built environment, so useful to architects and planners and people who do economic analysis. That core basis of data to support our strategic planning function has now been supplemented by the data source supporting other mayoral priorities, such as violence reduction and our fight against knife crime, the building of our data expertise and our ability to share sensitive data safely gives us insights into the causes of crime. We've got major projects on predicting air quality, and we're on the cusp of an open API, publishing an open API on London's 48-hour air quality forecast through our work with the Alan Turing Institute, National Institute for Artificial Intelligence, and working with King's College London, two global universities. And finally, that work has helped us, to what I'm going to talk about next, understand an immediate challenge that arose because of the current pandemic. So our model with the Turing Institute relied upon our use of the city's camera network, so that's at least 900 cameras from Transport for London, and other valuable data sets that come from our transport system. This gave us an idea of traffic flow and enabled us with some other data sets to model what pollution levels were like. When the crisis hit, we realised that we could repurpose this system to understand the busyness of the city. That means observance of restrictions by people and the economic activity and vitality of various areas of the city. So bringing together 900 cameras from TfL and many more from the individual boroughs in London, and bringing that together with some of our data around other traffic counts, we're able to compare activity to normal and also to zero, which was what was happening during extreme lockdown. This also enables us to flag to policymakers unusual activity and provide enough detail to inform decisions, showing us the type of activity, location, time of day. Note, we're not tracking individuals, just viewing patterns and trends. So our expertise in having a smart data, a London data store and a history with data, plus the innovation of working on a big city challenge, gave us a readiness, if you like, during the pandemic to repurpose technology to give real insights into how we can help areas of London that are hardest hit. And the data that we have from cameras and traffic counts is also able to be supplemented by private sector data. We've been working very closely with London First, the business representative body here, on seeing how we can add data that the private sector holds but does not use to make this picture even richer. Our partnership with MasterCard has meant that we could add data spend from credit cards into this analysis. So over time, we will see a rich picture of areas that are hardest hit and take appropriate action at a city level. The kind of products that we can have or will be available by APIs, dashboards, and others, and we'll be able to give a borough level view. So from a strategic authority point of view, we're able to cascade that information down to our 32 municipal authorities, each representing around 250,000 people in this city, and then down still further into a local view. Now, the future vision for our data store isn't this idea of a mass data aggregator. The model that I've just put up here on slide 10 proposes our new data store 3.0, as not the central warehouse of data in the city, but the central register of data and APIs in the ecosystem. Something that respects the federated nature of London, that there are many different data holders. And think of it this way, it's like a library index card, really. So back in the day, certainly when I went to university, you'd go to the library and you'd pull out an index card from a wooden shelf, and it would tell you where the book was, which would either be fetched by yourself or the librarian. And so our central data store essentially is a registry of that metadata. It's a registry of descriptions of where that data is. So building this new platform, we will be able to identify, I believe, significant numbers of data sets, which through a purpose-led approach, being clear about our purpose, i.e. it's not that we want to aggregate all the data, but we want to use this data for climate change purposes or easing congestion, we will be able to build confidence in the data sharing agreements that we need and the leadership buy-in to do some really valuable data projects. So Data Store 3.0 is in the process of being, there's a discovery exercise around it, and we will go later on this year, end of this year, next year, into procurement. So that sort of suggests one thing, that you don't need to spend the earth on a technology platform here. One of the most important things around data are in fact the people, and bringing together data experts and domain experts together in one room to tease out those key questions that we need to answer as a city. So what does the future look like? Well, for us, we need to deploy data, digital and technology to support London's recovery and the plans that the Mayor has set out in the last few months. We've learned from the crisis that there needs to be more capacity to deal with real-time data and build our expertise around that because the crisis demanded it. We need more adaptive approaches to mobilise non-government stakeholders to deal with recovery issues, such as the use of open call. We know that our future city, through the growth of 5G, will be a more sensor-rich environment, but we think there's an opportunity for both public, private and other organisations who have a common purpose around climate change, more than ever, to share their data. So moving beyond that argument and discussion around the commercialisation of environmental data towards one of common purpose. And then finally, I think there's a key role for city government, and I mentioned before the Emerging Technology Charter for London. There's a key role for city government to set the expectations around public trust. Because without public trust in emerging technologies, there won't be a solid foundation for innovators and investors in smart city technology. And while there's quite a lot of work going on at a national government level, and there may well be important regulations put in place, the proximity of the city to innovators and its democratic mandate from people means that it has a really important role in setting out the expectations on ways of working, open dialogue, storage and use of data, expectations around privacy by design, and cybersecurity. And so our next piece of work as a smart city, by the end of the year, will be to publish a charter that sets out those expectations, having consulted innovators and talked to the public. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Theo Blackwell. He well explained London's approach to user-centric design and collaboration, open core innovation, and urban data. Thank you for a great presentation. Next, let's watch the presentation by Paul McConnell, an Associate Director of Digital Studio at Arup. Paul McConnell joined Arup from the intersection where he established the advisory and the product design practice while leading award-winning efforts for cultural mobility and civic services, corporate and community project. Let's watch the presentation on the subject of human-centered approaches to improving data and making smarter cities.
Hello, my name is Paul McConnell. I'm a director at Arup. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Sorry I can't be there in person, but I look forward to talking to everyone on the panel. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about our work in designing smart cities for people and an opportunity that I think that we all have in helping make better cities and better spaces for our communities by rethinking our relationship with technology and data. So when many people think about cities, they think about skylines, such as London, this picture right here, a place where I live and work. I'm a native New Yorker, so I might reference New York quite a bit. They think of skyscrapers, infrastructure, this kind of top-down appeal. But as a designer such as myself, when I think about cities, I often think about the street level. So people, how we move through, how we live, how we share ideas, in cities and spaces. And I think that's one of the reasons why we come to cities for people. And it's one of the things a lot of us have missed quite a bit in 2020. So I see this as historically smart cities have emphasized hardware, big data, and advanced computing in many ways over the needs of people and the challenges that they face. Often it is this top-down kind of marketing and push to be innovative and to be new. And actually that inflexibility in understanding user needs and outcomes has prevented some of really the promise of smart cities from coming true. So essentially this presentation is going to explore some successful initiatives, how we've learned from other projects over time, and how we can help take these learnings and actually create massive change. So essentially, I believe this next wave of smart cities will combine the best aspects of technology, but also do it in an ethical way and an inclusive way that allows people to share their fears, their motivations, their frustrations, be involved in the process to create, really understand what this technology is capable of, and essentially to do that, to pilot and to grow and to scale them over time. So we're going to go in a little bit about what's happened, kind of what I believe the moment we're in right now, and really what we can do. And then the big thing, the big takeaway that I would like everyone from here to come away with is, I believe by applying more of a user-focused methodology to your projects, you greatly reduce the risk of building the wrong thing, of spending your time, your energy, and money spending something that solves the wrong problem. So if you are a policymaker, a government worker, a tech vendor, I think we can all agree that we want to make impact and we want our things to be realized. And essentially, I see a lot of progress and potential with these opportunities. So essentially, I subscribe to the theory of design makes technology less scary. So if you think about the separate waves of technology innovation, it started in the early days of computing with these dark DOS terminals, these black screens, if you remember, where experts had to be able to program them. Technology was very scary at the time. And since then, we've gone through waves. The first Macintosh with the graphical user interface, the advent of email, or the popularization of email in the 90s, the smartphone. All of these were waves in which technology was made less scary using design by understanding user needs and simplifying it to help them complete tasks. And now we're in this exciting moment of being able to do that on a larger city scale. And a lot of the projects that we work on at Arup and my team, we think about the back-end systems that run these, but also the customer touch points, and even the things that are not directly technology that you engage with at all. And we've run a number of projects over the years. And we like to think about it in this scale of expanding the city out. So it isn't just the moment someone comes in touch with it, it's these layers. Starting at the top with this top layer of the systems, the policies, the strategy, and then kind of at the bottom you have the infrastructure. And in the middle, if we're doing our job right, they meet to create these great user experiences. And we can't do that alone. We have to think about this in a way of integrated teams, such as members of this conference, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, and working together over time to make it true. And in kind of the spirit of our team, we focus on, it's actually captured perfectly in this quote by the great British architect Cedric Price, is technology is the answer, but what was the question? And that's true. We often jump too quick to dropping technology into a situation, and we don't really know why. So I'm going to push you to kind of think about focusing on outcomes for people before we're focusing too much on the output. And I think that's really hard. And that's even hard for designers. Designers often jump to the solution. They want to sketch up an idea. They want to put they want you to hear it, but they don't take a minute. We don't take a minute to take a pause and say, do we really understand the context, the needs, et cetera? And I think that's a great opportunity for all of us. And we're building on these great trends. These trends in which there's a lot of momentum in a very short period of time. So we're in this moment where we have personal technology, the technology that helps us in our homes get through cities, and then technologies in our spaces. And a lot of them are really separate. And the clients in the private and public sector clients that we work for really need our help in making sense of this technology and the potential opportunities and risks associated with all of the data within there. We're seeing that play out even this week in the news with massive IPOs and considerations from companies like Planeteer. These are companies that control huge amounts of private data and government data and military data, as well as acquisitions such as TikTok, in which governments are now getting involved with devices that my daughter uses and their applications. So this has really changed quite a bit in the past couple of years, and this is creating actually a more aware consumer that are saying, you know, what are you doing with that information, and do I need to pay more attention to that? And I think this is important because it's not only created new behaviors, it's created new skepticism and maybe even activism that could stop and slow smart city projects in a way that we haven't seen before, and going from there. And in many ways, actually, we've seen this before, and cities have gone through this need and this balance for having a top-down vision but a bottom-up inclusion. An example that I always like is from my home city of New York, which faced massive migration issues in the early 1800s. The city was kind of bursting at its seam, kind of almost doubling year over year, and they needed to do something. It was kind of leading to pollution and sewage issues and quality of life issues. And in 1809, they established and put out the famous Commissioner's Plan. And this was essentially the grid system that we know today of avenues and streets that essentially laid the groundwork for New York to grow into in the 100 years that follows, as the population went from 90,000 people to 4 million just 100 years later. And essentially, it's an interesting concept where you started dividing public spaces, private spaces, parks, et cetera. But essentially, it was still flexible enough to have the future innovations grow into. So in that next 100 years, 200 years, we saw electricity, sewage, transportation systems all have a place to flourish into. And each of them were responsible for taking innovations of their day and meeting them with an actual citizen need to create something better that helped define, in this case, the modern city. And there's this opportunity for us to do this again now. But a lot of that is, the scary part is a lot of that information is often unseen. So I'm going to explain a couple of projects that stand out in my opinion, and I want you to kind of grab a few takeaways that I'll recap a little bit later. The first project is going to really focus on this idea of, how can we better focus on human outcomes and also designing for flexibility. So I'm going to start with a project that's very near to where a lot of people are viewing this, in Songdo. So Songdo was one of the first, if not the first, generation smart city. It was a very ambitious vision for the early 90s to involve government, technology companies, to put a vision of what a great future city could be like for residents and commuters. And in the 20 and 30 years that followed, those buildings started to come up and essentially start to realize that vision. And a lot of great things really came out of it. When you look at some of the environmental goals that had been exceeded, these really forward thinking that a lot of places now are still trying to kind of get their head around, they're able to do that. Putting in kind of forward thinking transit systems as well. A lot of this was really had a lot of good intentions. But as it's one of the first smart cities, it's been researched quite a bit. And we've seen that one of the things that people have noticed is that the city itself is not as kind of crowded or as vibrant as many residents or people that maybe even consider being there had thought. And so you're seeing kind of population goals for residents and commuters not be met, which leads to kind of an overall quietness of the city, and as I said, a vibrancy of it. And if you interview people and locals there, it's a little bit lonely. And you can almost see that in a lot of kind of walking around the streets where you don't have neighborhoods and small businesses and different ways for other people to get involved or make it their own. And I think this is a challenge. This is a challenge when you often have too much of a top-down scheme. People can't really see themselves in it or adapt over time. And we've all changed as a species in the last 30 years. And I think people want to, you need your cities and spaces to change as well. And you see that with the technology decisions as well. I think a lot of the technology with the U-Life model that was put into place Often it's very siloed, so vendors and building operators might not necessarily be sharing information in a way with each other, with the wider city, with citizens, and that kind of really limits potential for innovation, for new opportunities, and for change. And when you think about it, this is actually kind of a really very different from the way a technology company itself runs and a community runs. So if you think about technology companies of the last 30 years, the successful ones have been able to take the latest innovation of their day, understand an unmet user need, and adapt their product and service to kind of go with. And you can kind of see our city technology companies, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, they were the ones that were able to capitalize on a lot of these changes in a way that legacy companies weren't. And then even in communities, you see communities that were don't necessarily have to be economically thriving. They were able to adapt through COVID and change the nature of the community over time. So I think there's an interesting thing of our communities and our tech companies can adapt and be flexible, but why can't our smart communities when we put them together? And I think that's a principle I'd like to come back to. We've actually seen some kind of pretty successful examples of projects building on learnings from places like Songdo, again, Songdo being an early bell cow for this sort of work. A project that we're working on with the FCO in Ankara is called Healthy Streets. And this is a project that actually started by focusing on human outcomes and saying, we want to have healthy communities. They were noticing that there were heavy issues around pollution, childhood obesity, a lot of them kind of caused by vehicular traffic in these areas. And that became kind of a driver. How do we help people become healthier? And how do we measure environmental standards? And how do we work with people to include them in the process? And this is a process that we've been working on with a number of different stakeholders, and essentially starting with that level. What makes a healthy community? And then learning from this community through a series of design labs in which we interviewed people to understand the spirit of this area, because you're not trying to change that, and trying to kind of think about different schemes when it comes to urban planning, bike lanes, public spaces, safer streets, local flora and fauna to help create better environmental conditions as well, to come together. And in the next waves of this project, we've been able to build on some of these earlier design labs, so labs that focused on understanding a problem, or a lab that focused on co-creating solutions, to right now this stage we're moving into of piloting new ideas. So can we test, are we headed in the right direction through these exercises? So the other consideration to keep in mind is this idea around, having a simple and clear story, but also being transparent and kind of discussing your data. A project that I worked a little bit on in the beginning, and Arup is still a client with, I would say it would be the kind of the Songdo story of its day, would be Sidewalk Labs Toronto. So for those who don't know, Sidewalk Labs is a subsidiary of Alphabet, focusing on smart city solutions. Very ambitious project and company that was started a number of years ago. And they were awarded the opportunity to concept and come up with new plans for Quayside, which was a brownfield development in Toronto. And they actually started by taking a lot of those lessons that I mentioned before, starting with outcomes, kind of explaining what might this feel like to be an elderly person receiving health care, or a student making their way to school, really painting a really clear picture of that within this larger ambitious vision that tied economic development, bringing in large companies such as Google and other tech players to revitalize this area. They also spent a lot of time thinking about an inclusive process in which they set up demo spaces and demo labs to have people participate, so they can be heard and kind of understand often tricky smart city technologies in a way they couldn't before. So really successful. But around the same time, there was a rise, globally in technology company skepticism. This was led by a lot of, the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal. And you had a very vibrant, active local Toronto community start to raise a hand and say, what are you actually doing with our data? What are and how does it benefit us? And can we trust you? And I think it was really early, and it was maybe possibly even caught off guard because it was still a plan and the city hadn't been realized, where they seemed to struggle with answering that, or the answers weren't sufficient. And in that vacuum, the public and their elected officials filled that void with a different story. and that led to, and there are many other factors, but being able to actually not being able to articulate what you were doing with the data and the benefit of it really helped contribute to stalling the project for Toronto. So while Sidewalk still continues and works with a number of other cities, this idea of having every other story so well told, but the data story was still incomplete, was a really important one. And I think more and more we're seeing that with skepticism and activism around our technology in our cities, and saying, what are you doing with this, and why are you only benefiting from it as opposed to directly people in communities. So I think that's a takeaway that I would put out there, of just saying, despite all of these things, an inclusive process, a clear vision, this narrative actually needs to be really tight, and you need to make sure that that your story's clear, and then it fits in with some of your other strategies. And we're seeing it time and time again with a number of cities that focus on this story part first. You focus on the human story, and then from there you can build into infrastructure. You can start thinking about the kind of the master planning roadmap. But by getting people to understand how their lives will benefit, and that you can protect the information that they're essentially giving up, you might see quite a bit of resistance, and we're seeing more and more resistance than in years past. And you're seeing other great organizations, ODI, which is speaking at this conference, does incredible work of coming up with standards and schemes, and in many ways, I think that's something that's needed for, you're seeing it in the U.S. and you're seeing it in China, where there's so much rapid technology development. We need other international institutions to say, what are we doing? What are these protocols? What are these privacy issues? I know we saw a number of years ago with GDPR in the European Union, very similar. How are we structuring it? Who's benefiting it? And who's managing the afterlife of it? Because it seems that this data is gathered and it floats off, and often not to the benefit of people, and it's actually causing quite a bit of risk. Another great initiative is Decode, which comes out of the European Union, and essentially has a number of citizen love projects, but it's taking smart city assignments, but organizing information in a very clear way to address people's concerns, to essentially use some protocols to make sure that information is being gathered in an ethical way, and they're seeing quite a bit of early success. So as I close out, one of the things I want to say is I am very optimistic about the potential of technology in cities. I see that there needs to be this combination of top-down vision but bottom-up inclusion, because that actually seems to lead to a lot of these success stories. Without it, if it's one way or the other, they seem to stall. So how do you have people get involved? So a couple of the themes that I just want to recap that I covered today to leave on would be, one, again, focusing on these human outcomes before you jump to it. Is don't jump to technology for technology's sake. Think about how it benefits citizens' lives today, how they're living on them, how they're living. Also being able to design for flexibility, much like the successful tech companies or communities. You don't want to be too rigid, because our world is changing at such a quick speed that if you are too rigid, you actually become a little obsolete. So you need to kind of think about flexible ways where these systems can adapt. Having a very clear story, so that's kind of table stakes these days. We can't just kind of unfurl a sheet of a master plan or blind people with specifications documents. They have the means and the power to shut these down through their own social media networks, to kind of communicate directly to elected officials. And I think by a simple storytelling, and this could be using different mediums from video to journeys to prototyping, we're going to need to do these things for people to get it, and then also to maybe even go through those feedback loops. A big point, too, is also discussing your data. So how are you gathering it, protecting it, managing it? How are people's privacy, will they be, who are you trading and selling it to, and how their privacy will be protected? And the only way that I think we're going to do this, the last point I would say, is by kind of an approach around integrative thinking and integrative teams. These problems are too complex for any one company or individual. You can see they span, as I covered before, a systemic level, down to people that are really good with researching and talking to local communities. And it isn't one or the other, it's all of us working together. So it's exciting to see conferences like this are starting to, we're gathering again. And that's important because we need these sorts of forums to gather and explore these ideas and move forward. So I think there's a great potential for us to think about data in making our cities more resilient. I think there's a prompt that I'll leave you with is we often think about the environment, and it's this kind of call to action in forums such as the Paris Climate Accord, in which we're setting ambitious goals. But what is the Paris Climate Accord for our data and our information? How are we protecting this globally? Is there political will to do so? And how are we making sure that we understand the impact of all the things that we're gathering on the people that ultimately we're here to help? So thank you for your time, and I look forward to helping solve this problem with you.
Thank you for Paul McConnell. He well summarized 5 things we have to consider to make the better city for community. First one is the combination between top-down vision and the bottom-up inclusion. And the second one is that we should select the flexible ways to adapt the technology. And the third one is we need a clear story to build a smart city. And next about data management and privacy. And the finally, he emphasized integrated him because the smart city is too complex. Okay, thank you very much. And next, third one, we'll invite Kyung-Jun Lee, project manager of the SK Telecom. Kyung-Jun Lee works at Massive IoT division of Smart City and IoT business. Let's watch the presentation on the subject of Data Hub for Smart City by Kyung-Jun Lee. Please.
Good morning. Nice to meet you. I'm Kyung-Jun Lee, working for SK Telecom. SK Telecom is leading mobile operator in Korea. In terms of smart city, SK Telecom believes that smart city is composed of smart solutions and the data hub. SK Telecom provides many smart solutions, the energy solutions like BEMS, FEMS, LEMS, and social welfare solutions for the elderly, and the smart healthcare solutions, etc. And currently, SK Telecom is building a large-scale data hub in Daegu metropolitan city. I'm in charge of building a data hub, and data hub development will be completed at next month, and is scheduled to be operated in next year. I'm happy to give a presentation what we have done. Before building a data hub, we need to take a look at what a data hub is. The figure below is defined by Smart Cambridge, which is highly cited among the many data hub definitions. According to this, a data hub provides 2 main functions. The first is collecting data from all smart city solutions. The second is to provide the collected data to the third-party developers, data analysts, and the city operators. However, this concept is quite vague because it looks like a large-scale data lake or data warehouse. It appears to provide the function of simply collecting city data and passing it to the third party. To develop a data hub, we needed to clarify the purpose of data hub. First, in terms of data collection, storage, and management, what kind of data will be collected? And the second is, in terms of who will use the result of data hub for what purpose? After discussion and consultation, we established our basic assumption. That is, Data Hub collect and analyze the city data needed to solve urban problems and then suggest the solutions. In other words, we believe that analyzing the city data is the most important purpose, not just collecting and providing data. Then we need to think about what kind of data to collect. To do this, we should consider the difference between the service platform and the data hub. A service platform is a system for providing services. It is usually composed of a device, sensors, network, server, and user application. The figure below is an example of AMI service, advanced metering infrastructure service for electricity. The AMI service installs AMI devices, sensors in homes, buildings, factories, etc. And when the measured data is transmitted to the server through a network such as LoRa, CAT-M1, and then the server monitors the power consumption status based on the collected data, and then generate the subscriber billing data. This allows subscriber to check power consumption and charges at any time through the user application. The most important thing here is that the AMI device sensors are directly connected to the service platform. And the platform provides a health check function to monitor the status of the device or sensors. In addition, the service platform is providing user applications directly. Currently, in the case of SK Telecom, more than 1.5 million lines are connected to the AMI service platform. There we have some questions whether all of these 1.5 million lines should be connected to a data hub, or whether there should be a device health check functions in data hub, or whether user application should be provided by data hub. Even in the case of the AMI service, more than 1 million lines are connected, but if all smart city service devices need to be connected, there are doubts about how large a data hub is needed. So we decided that the service platform and the data hub should be separated, and the data hub collects the data necessary for data analysis from the service platform. Based on the previous review, we have defined the data hub as follows. The data hub offers urban data-driven solutions to solve complex urban problems. First one, built independently from the service platform. By separating in this way, even if a problem occurs in the data hub, the service platform can stably provide services. And second, collect the data selectively from the service platform. The data items depend on the purpose of data analysis. Third one is provide cross-domain analysis based on variously selected data. And the last one is share the selected data and the result of cross-domain analysis with third parties including citizens. Based on this definition, SK Telecom is building a large data hub at Daegu Metropolitan City. This data hub collects city data from mass platform, public safety platform, city facility management platform, load and energy platform, and Daegu legacy data. The data hub consists of a total of 6 modules: interfaces for data collection, data warehouse and data mart, data analysis, provisioning, visualization, and basic infrastructure for data hub operation. The collected data and data analysis results are shared with third parties, such as local government, citizens, and developers. Daegu Data Hub is a relatively large data hub because it collects data from various service platforms, as I said before. So based on this, we are discussing how to introduce a data hub with several local government. But in reality, there is no reason to build such a large data hub right now. This is because the data is scattered, and in most cases, is insufficient or not enough. And the local government have different situation. Therefore, we believe that rather than building a large-scale data hub, it is desirable to build a small-scale data hub first, and then expand the scale. In page 1, it is to build and operate a small data hub by determining the problem that needs to be solved urgently, collecting data, and combining it with private data. Through this, we will create a success story of data hub that can play a practical role in solving urban problems, even though it is small, and gradually expand it to various areas. This kind of the paged approach takes a very, very long time, so I think the most important thing here is a strong leadership. I will give you some examples of the data hub basic. We call it data hub basic, small data hub. First is to optimize the petrol routing course of the police car. The second is the parking lot demand analysis. Third one is management of urban facilities to keep a clean street. The last one is management to maintain social distancing at tourist spots. The petrol routing optimization is to recommend routing course for efficient petrol. SK Telecom had done a pilot test with Daegu Police Agency for 3 months. 5 regions in Daegu were selected, and data from the past 1 year were used. As a result, the emergency request call rate decreased by 16.3%, crime rate 18.6%, and the theft rate 22%. Of course, this result has been carried out in the short term, so it is difficult to generalize. We are under discussion how to upgrade and develop services for the entire Daegu city. Next one is parking lot demand analysis. This suggests the areas where new parking lots are needed in the city. For this purpose, the parking lot data, CCTV data, parking ticket data, SK Telecom's floating population and navigation data are used. In addition, we are trying to identify the cause of parking lot activation through correlation analysis between data. For example, it can be used as data to analyze the correlation between parking lot data and the parking ticket data near the parking lot to determine the degree of impact between them. And next one is this is a very simple but very effective urban facility management system in Korea. Pedestrians may experience discomfort due to unnecessary facilities in pedestrian road. For example, electricity installation and the industry installation, especially military installation in Korea, make pedestrians uncomfortable. So we intend to improve the inconvenience of citizens by this kind of small scale data hub. And last one is social distancing at tourist spot. It's a proposal to implement efficient measures using predictions based on the past and quasi real-time data. Near real-time data means the 5 minutes ago. For this, we use Corona-19 data, tourist spot data, weather data, public safety data, SKT's floating population and navigation data. Through this, we intend to minimize the impact of COVID-19 by predicting the density of travelers, distributing them through appropriate measures in advance, informing the current situation to travelers, and recommending other travel destinations. Closing my presentation, I want to rethink about what smart city really is. The picture below is an example of a smart city, Dubai and Saint-Sulpice-la-Forêt, a small town in France. Everyone knows Dubai, so I don't need to explain anymore. Saint-Sulpice-la-Forêt shows a practical success story. Although there is no specific master plan for smart city and no huge investment. One day, due to the sudden increase in water bill, the mayor and citizens recognized the problems and identified the problem. As a result, they found water leaking from the complex and old water pipes caused by an old building. So, 27 IoT sensors were installed and managed. As a result, they were able to monitor real-time water consumption and whether there was a problem, and showed how they could reduce water consumption. This can be evaluated as a successful case of solving the city problems with strong leadership and citizen engagement. Building a truly data-driven smart city is very long-term and complex task. This requires strong leadership, continuous and consistent effort, and most importantly, the active participation of citizens. Although there is a very long way to go, I believe that data-driven smart city will be built in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyung-jun Lee. He well explained the Smart City Data Hub, which provide data-driven solutions for solving the complex city problems. Thank you for a great presentation. And lastly, I'd like to invite Jung-woo Ha, the head of the Naver AI. He is the head of the Naver AI Research Center and serves as a council member of the Open Data Strategy Council under the Prime Minister. Let's watch the presentation on the subject of Naver AI in users' daily life by Naver Global AI Director Ha Jung-woo. Please.
Thank you for introduction, and thank you for inviting me at the Smartshity International Symposium. I'm Jung-woo Ha from Naver. I'm a researcher, AI researcher in Naver. It is my honor to present our technology and services here. And my topic is some AI application and technology that the users can meet everyday life. Actually, my topic seems some different from the other smart city topics, but I think AI is a very important technology to make smart city realize. Okay. Yeah. Actually, the Alan Turing proposed the concept of AI in 1930s. That means the history of AI is longer than the modern computer history, I think. And in 1956, the AI, the terminology of artificial intelligence was the firstly used in Dartmouth conference. That means actually over 60 years have passed. So in meanwhile, the AI had some ups and downs for 60 years. And recent advancement of deep learning leads to the current nowadays the hype of AI. So and since the AlphaGo issue in 2016, and there are many wow AI technologies. So in this slide, you can see some very amazing demonstration. So actually, this is some generative adversarial networks. The name is Gaugen from the NVIDIA. So when a user draw very simple figure like the left side, just actually that is some semantic map with some semantic segmentation with some object, then AI can generate photorealistic images like right part. So, and actually the biggest issue in this year in AI is GPT-3. Many people think that GPT-3 is the biggest issue in AI. Actually, the GPT itself was invented in 2018, I think. So since the transformer models was proposed in 2017, in every year the new innovative models using transformers came out. So actually the reason why GPT-3 is amazing is GPT-3 can generate contents that human cannot discriminate that these contents was generated by human or AI. So many people, some people think GPT-3 might be a starting point of artificial general intelligence. Yeah. So also, many people think that AI is beyond technology. AI is a new paradigm to change the human lives, like some internet or smartphone. Okay. Actually, I also wish this AI it will become some new paradigm, because I am an AI research scientist, and my son is very only 5 years old. So AI is a hype. It is important to AI is a hype. Keep going, I think. Yeah, I think the UK audiences might be unfamiliar with my company, Naver. So I want to introduce my company, Naver, very briefly. Naver is the Korea #1 search and AI technology platform company. Actually, simply, Naver is a Korean Google. Actually, the Naver covers very diverse internet services, including the searching, the video, the payment, the finance, the music, then some SNS, the webtoon content, the e-commerce, the messenger, the reservation, and something. So that means that most of our services are strongly related to the human, the user's daily lives. So some user can buy the items with our shopping e-commerce site, and they can pay for their goods with our payment systems. And the user can listen to the music with the music services, and they can see some movies, watch the movies via with the video services. Okay? So to enhance our services, we are focusing on some AI technologies. And actually, we think to make some differences the research is very important issue. So because we have our global branches, actually our research center in Korea, and we have some messenger line. The headquarters of line is in Japan. We have another AI research center in Grenoble, France, and we are developing a new development site in Vietnam. So we are constructing a new global AI R&D belt for the AI research. And for Clover, so what is Clover? Clover is on the AI assistant platform, like the Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa. Actually, the Clover covers beyond the assistant platforms, the more general AI platforms. Since 2017, we have launched some very diverse speakers lineup, and also we are providing some the AI APIs such as OCR, or chatbot, and speech recognition and synthesis, and some the face recognition, and etc. Many people have some concerns on some issues about the some job. So that means AI can take their humans' job, but we think the AI can be a very good tool for for humans. The AI can repeat the tasks for humans using our AI APIs. So this is our as I said, research is a very important issue to make some differences. So we established some ideal cycle from the researches to the services. Okay. And this is our the publication achievement. So actually, I'm considering comparing with some the result achievement with the global companies. These the scores. The scores are not impressive, but the important thing is to continuously increase the research capability. Okay? This is an example of our fundamental AI researches. It's, the optimizers. Okay? So if you want to make the neural net model, then you can enter the kind of some pip install add-on p. Then you can use our new optimizers, the outperforming the conventional state-of-the-art optimizer add-on. Okay? And because we are operating the mobile services, to make models very compact is very important issues. So we developed some new state-of-the-art, very energy-efficient models. The name is RxNet, the outperforming the EfficientNet from Google's. And this is our research work is actually many people are surprised for the performance of GAN, like this. Okay, and this is our more the daily life AI services. So many people can see these scenes when they go to the event or conference registration. So to register the conference, they should give the ID card and check whether this ID card is identical to the registers. But we can use some kind of some face authentication. Then we can reduce the time to spend to registration. Okay, this is our new video AI application. So actually, many people want to see want to watch each member isolated video. So AI can make the member isolated video like these figures using some tracking technology and the re-identification technology from videos. And actually, we have a very strong technology on OCR. So if using OCR, we can extract very important information from the receipt or the other documents, okay, like this figure. And this is our new devices. If you are the parents, then I think this device is very useful for many
생각과자
parents.
아이 책이네. 페이지는 민서가 넘겨줄래?
옛날에 작은 할머니와
Using OCR and speech recognition and speech synthesis, our device, Global Lamp, can read the book instead
어느 날
of the father and
할머니가
mother
생강 과자를
for their
만들기
children.
시작했어요.
Yeah.
작은
Actually,
생강 과자 아이를
it is better
만들어야지.
that
반죽을 납작하게
the
밀고 작은
parents
사내 아이
read
모양으로
for the
잘랐어요.
books for children. But when they are too busy to read, then Global Lamp help the parents to read the book. Right? And we make the AI dialogue agent that can get the call instead of the business owners. This for the small and middle business owners. Okay? And this kind of technology can be applied to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 viruses. Actually, the officers should give a call to self-quarantine whether they have some symptoms on COVID-19, but this can be performed by our care call systems. Okay, this is our speech synthesis demonstration. And when the COVID-19 pandemic situation, many teachers and professors should make their materials, and they should record their the class lecture video. But it is not easy to record their own voice. So when a teacher enter the text, then they get the wave file, synthesizing the text. Then the wave file can be embedded to their presentation files. Then it can help the teacher or professors to prepare the class lecture materials. As I said, the research is a very important issue. So Naver had announced to make some new AI long-term research center for long-term researches. And we decided to make some supercomputer infrastructure for giant-scale AI models. So this is the first time in the industry side in Korea. So that means Naver are seriously focusing on the AI technology and the services. So our AI technologies are adopted in many everyday life services like this figure. So thank you for attention. And if you have any question, you can send email to me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Jung Woo-ha. He well and detailed explained the latest research technology of the Naver AI. The Naver is the biggest platform company in Korea. So they provide values to users in daily life and the various services using it. Thank you for great presentation. Okay. Yes, we had we have had all the presentations prepared so far, and it seems to have been an opportunity to get a good grasp of the various technology aspects of the creating a smart city in the UK and Korea. From now on, we will take the moment to consider the panel discussion and the strategy and countermeasures to respond to issues about the smart city data and privacy and citizen engagement and so on. In addition, we'll ask selected questions to the speakers among the questions given in real time and those previously received through the online in the website. Okay, yes. First, let's hear the general opinion of the David Coco as part of the panel. He is the head of the digital sector at the UK's national standard body, and previously served as a director and leadership position at SAS, CA, Notel, Alcatel, and LACAR. Please give us your opinion about our topic or the speaker's presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me. I am delighted to be speaking to you here from the UK. I'm sorry we can't be there for obvious reasons, but delighted to I guess be representing BSI's views as the UK's national standards body. Some very interesting presentations, and delighted to be hearing some quite consistent views around citizen centricity, using data effectively to develop the right approach and the right focus for citizens being at the absolute heart of data and smart cities. One of the sort of key questions that was coming my way was really around sort of standardization of data and how difficult is it and what really should we be focused on, which is a really interesting and quite challenging question to answer. It is absolutely very challenging and very complex. Just the sheer diversity of data and the themes that a city needs to grapple with in terms of managing and monitoring its key performance indicators, which have been discussed here via the various different presenters. If you look at the sheer diversity of information that needs to be gathered around transport, housing, infrastructure, digital infrastructure as we transform using new technology, social care, economic development, population growth and demographics, it's very, very complicated. And also if you start to then overlay the indications, the measures, the key performance indicators, looking at things like air quality, resilience, population growth, housing, crime, productivity, they are all very, very challenging topics. I think from our perspective as the national standards body, we need to prioritize the data that we're gathering, using and sharing, and need to consider the skills that we need. Theo mentioned this in terms of how do we develop the right skills within a city infrastructure to be able to manipulate the data in the right way. But the key thing is it needs to be aligned with citizens, people, the citizens' policy and the operational needs. So we need to prioritize the data that we are gathering and the standards that we require that are needed to inform those policies which support efficient citizen-centric services, whether they be mobility, journey planning or payment or protection of those citizens. And we need to prioritize those use cases. You know, what are we really focused on from a data interoperability standpoint, and what are the best practices we need to develop and we need to deploy. And Paul mentioned a great phrase, which is human outcome focused. I think is a really important area and a great phrase to use when looking at the type of data we should be focused on. From a BSI perspective, we have been working in this space for a number of years around smart cities, and we've published a whole range of guides and best practices to support cities to simplify the complexity of data and the transformation to becoming smart. And these standards have been internationally adopted, ISO IEC standards. And they cover areas and topics such as leadership and strategy and decision making. Through 37006, there is a developed smart city framework and a guide on indicators for cities. We've also developed a series of standards around guides for data sharing and information services for cities. Also, very importantly, which is often not put to the front and center of thinking around smart cities and data, is security and a security-minded approach, which is within PAD's publicly available specification 185, and thinking about secure by design. How do we develop new services using data that are trusted and private and protected, applying rules such as GDPR, as mentioned earlier, but also protecting our national and critical infrastructure as we start to gather data from our fixed assets within our cities. How do we ensure the safety of those assets and their critical nature? We've also developed concepts around the smart city model. So what do you need as those principal foundational building blocks? And how do you actually discover data, and how do you connect to it using technology such as IoT to be able to auto-discover the data? So that's simplification of how you collect the data in a more effective way. I'm very pleased to say that South Korea, has actually been leading some of the developments in this space. The ISO 37106 standard is what we've built the smart city kite mark on. So how cities become certified against these key principles. And Shenzhen was the first city in the world to receive certification. And what this actually means that the city is accredited that it meets the highest standards for vision management, road mapping, citizen-centric services or centricity around the use of data, urban reuse management, platform efficiencies and benefits realized. So this is really setting the benchmark for this particular city in South Korea, really leading best practice in the development of smart cities. And just finally, as it was mentioned, and thank you very much for the presenter who referenced Alan Turing and his very early work on AI. The Joint Technical Committee here in the UK and internationally are embarking on developing the first management system standard for AI. You may be very familiar with other very well used management system standards such as ISO IEC 27001 series for cybersecurity. We're developing the first standard to complement that on AI, and that will be developed over the next sort of 18 months or so. So thank you very much. That's just my reflections, I guess, on BSI's perspective.
Thank you, David Coco, for the good opinion aspect, the standard aspect in the smart city. The standardization is very difficult issues in the smart city, and also it is very important very important in the city area because we needed the interoperability between the platforms and the data and services. So we need the standardization and globally. Okay, thank you very much. And now, shall we hear from the presenters about some questions? First, I'd like to ask Mr. Theo Blackwell. The question is, in terms of data of the city, you mentioned about metadata registry. I totally agree with you about that approach. And also you mentioned about that you needed to be deployed digital technology to support London's recovery from this crisis. To this, you have pointed out that we need more capacity to deal with real-time data. Please explain the more detail for these issues for the real-time data. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the recovery, the response to the current crisis really highlighted was that the city decision makers needed to ingest large amounts of data just to see whether London was okay on a daily basis. And that provided probably a bit of a challenge to the way that City Hall is the strategic authority for London, which looks more in terms of the long-term growth of the city, was operating. So we need to know on a daily basis how London was doing on a range of factors. So that really put a pressure on building the right skills base of data analysts and creating processes whereby we could see that data. And I think that the city's still on a journey around that. However, we were able to exemplify through the repurposing of existing projects how live data could give us those insights, both to provide that daily insight, plus over time give her a much deeper view of what was happening. And so really highlighting again the work that we're doing with the Turing Institute together with Lloyds Bank and Microsoft UK of that camera network, so 900 cameras plus MasterCard spending data plus data from mobile phone companies has enabled us to see three things. One is economic recovery. So are some areas of London more hit than others? For example, the west of London is highly dependent on the economy arising from Heathrow Airport. What's that going to look like over time? And so the insights we get from live data and a lot more data there will grow our picture there. Two, the impact of some of our environmental measures. So we've introduced low traffic zones and pavement build outs to make it social distancing easier as people walk around narrow pavements. So we built out into the streets and increased cycling opportunities. These aren't without any contest, because obviously you're eating space from the motorist, but our data will be able to show us the relative impacts and successes or failures of a lot of these schemes across London. So, and I think there's also a general use around looking at the relative, having knowledge about the relative impacts on varying levels of restrictions. And you may or may not know that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has just introduced a new system over the last few days, a 3-tier system of restrictions, which is a slightly different one than those implemented during the summer, and certainly different from lockdown. So we need to know what the association between varying levels of restrictions are and the impact on movement. And so that live data just totally gives us an insight into that, as opposed to what we were using before, which is effectively monthly data only on economics coming from the government.
Thank you very much. The good opinion and the detailed explain. And okay, next time I'd like to ask Mr. Paul McConnell. Okay, it's not about data. You told out that you should select the flexible ways to adopt the technology and the system. And my question is how we can achieve this flexibility in the city.
Yeah, great question. And thank you again for having me. So one of the comments I made was around this idea of flexibility, and one, we see it with the great technology companies. The iPhone didn't stop with the first version; it listened, it learned, it adapted. And then with great communities, we're seeing it with a lot in London of this concept of tactical urbanism of cafe owners saying, you know what, I need to stay in business, so I'm going to put tables out in front of my store. So these are all examples of technology companies historically being flexible and our cities being flexible. But again, how do we pull that together in the smart city moment is really this opportunity. So one of the ways that I've seen it change probably in my career is just even the way everyone was really going after these RFPs that were decade-long initiatives with really very few checkpoints along the way to check in on progress. And I think that shifted quite a bit, where probably even Theo puts out RFPs with his colleagues where where measurable impact must be demonstrated along the way through pilots and prototypes, and in order to give decision makers confidence to scale that up. So I think moments like that to test the success of a project are kind of that give you flexibility, because I think that gives a flexibility to a decision maker to either put more funding or divert funding involved. And so I think even thinking of that is probably an example that I would use. When it comes to data flexibility, I think it becomes the rules in which how and what we're sharing and with whom. And I think that becomes, I think there's a comment that keeps coming up over time previous speakers around kind of building trust. And so, making sure that the vendors or the partners you're going into business with or projects with, you have a trusted relationship with, you have milestones in which you can kind of make sure that they're proving their trust, and then you can essentially adjust over time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next time I'd like to ask the Kyung-Jun Lee. I think that you had many challenges during the development of data hub platform in Daegu City, and I'd like to ask you what was the most difficult challenge, and how did you overcome that problem?
As I said earlier, that it's very early stage to build a data hub for us. So there are so many questions or so many issues should be considered. But the first is related to the digitization. There are two kinds of data types. One is digital data, this data from the sensors directly. And second one is analog data. It's from the spreadsheet, like Excel or something like that. Unfortunately, most of data is that kind of analog data. So I think personally that the kind of digitization should be done firstly, and the second one is how can I say that the data qualifying guideline. There is no specific data qualification guideline in our company or in the country. So I think that all the stakeholders of the smart city should work together to establish the data qualification guideline. And last one is the most important thing is as I said before, the purpose of Data Hub is to analyze the data, city data. So at this point, I'd like to say that everyone want to get some result from the Data Hub. They should establish a clear purpose of data analysis, I think. Because without any kind of clear the purpose of data analysis, we will not be able to get the data because we don't know what kind of data should be collected. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, I would like to ask Dr. Jung Woo-ha. You mentioned about the care core, the system for active monitoring of the self-quarantining people in your the presentation. I think the AI technology, like the care core, can help many the vulnerable people in our city, such as the aged people and disabled people. My question is that about after COVID-19 crisis, what will be changed in the city via the AI technology, like the care core in the near future?
So perspective of city issues, right?
In the city area, the AI technology.
Actually, the one of the biggest issue, emerging issue, is for the making some good environment for elderly people. I think because Korea is also suffer from the many people's becoming the elder people are continuously increasing in Korea, right? And so after the COVID pandemic situation, our care core style AI can help some elderly people to make some their life more convenient or more happier, because elderly people want to some people or some things to talk with each other, I think. So as I know, some AI speakers can have that kind of issues, but the elderly people is not familiar with using some smartphone devices, some application issues. So AI core, basically AI core or care core is based on just call-based systems. That means the AI can give a call to the elderly people or the people familiar not with the new devices. And I think the COVID situation cannot perfectly resolve by the vaccine or the medicine. So AI, the care core style AI technology can help that kind of some for these elderly people or users to have some make some them more convenient, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, it's 3 minutes. Just a moment. So finally, we'll deal with the questions received in real time. The questions received in real time and online in advance were delivered to me. Among these, there was a question that stood out. The question is, in order to promote the data marketplace using smart city data, it is considered necessary to collect and manage not only public data but also private data. What are some ways to increase the participation of the private companies? I think Blackwell answered this question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think London as a city has been on a journey from looking at effectively establishing in 2010 a open data platform, which was about bringing together, linking together of government data sets. One of the benefits of which it was able to spur innovation from the private sector. And I think for quite a long time, we were either thinking about publishing things so innovation could happen from the private sector, or in other aspects, thinking about the opportunities of commercialization. So either we were maybe a step removed from the innovation that was happening with our data, or we were thinking about kind of a transactional relationship with the private sector. And I think my experience, certainly over the last 3 years as being Chief Digital Officer for London, is that there are many more opportunities for collaboration and partnerships with businesses than they were before. I think we've moved beyond some of those discussions that we were having earlier. Now, one of the initiatives that is happening in London that is spearheaded by the business group London First, of which Paul's organisation Arup is a leading voice in, is bringing together private sector organisations and talking to us at City Hall to actually understand what the key priorities of the Mayor of London are, and whether in sort of non-traditional ways, if you like. So if we have so what we did is we sat down and we did some work over about 4 or 5 months and have identified areas in which common data sharing would be a benefit to both. So to understand the dynamics of electric vehicle charging infrastructure and future demand was something that City Hall saw as an objective, but so did businesses. To understand the extent of digital exclusion in the city, private sector data from the telecoms firms and the other infrastructure firms, and indeed the banks, because of course we'll know who does online banking and who doesn't, can give us deeper insights into digital exclusion in a way that we wouldn't have before. And there was also a great deal of collaboration, and maybe it will be more collaboration in the future about that, the use of private sector data to understand busyness, which is the project that I set out. So this really builds on some of the work that we tried before on a case-by-case basis, which mainly revolved around private data sharing on understanding construction impacts on the city and the effect on congestion, to, through the London Data Commission, a more strategic conversation. And so the challenge for us as a city is really to develop the key data questions that we need to answer. So if we have a challenge around improving air quality, what are the key data questions that arise from that? And to be able to talk to the private sector. And I think the first steps to create a kind of strategic proximity between the private sector and the public sector on making the city better have played themselves out. And this program started before the current crisis, but I think that collaboration has been amplified by it. So that really helps our work when we develop a new data store, because we know the kinds of conversations that we can have with the private sector. And the most fruitful of those are actually around climate change and mobility. So we've made some interesting progress, certainly.
Okay, thank you. I think it's the key issue in the data-driven smart city. And the next question is, in order to manage government, business, and personal data in an integrated manner, there is a conflict of the interest between the aspect of the privacy protection and the openness of the information. So how do you coordinate this as the best practice for each country and a city? For this question, I'd like to Paul McConnell.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to add on to what Theo just mentioned before I answer the question, because he had a line earlier that I took down I really liked, is that might help with participation to common purpose. And I think right now we're in this moment of if you're a private company, you're trying to get people back into cities again, getting them back to offices, getting back to spending money, getting them back on transit. So we are kind of in it in a very different way in which we need to work together and possibly share our data for this larger common purpose. So I think that's a pretty exciting moment, because we are all in this this kind of in each of our respective cities, trying to understand people, their motivations, their behaviors, in order to get them to come and do things again. So there's these constant loops of understanding data, coming up with new ideas, and then kind of tweaking accordingly. So that was kind of just a reaction to some of the stuff that Theo was mentioning. So to your question around this kind of conflict of interest, or is there a conflict of interest between privacy and the data that's being gathered? I don't think if people's interests are being protected. And I think we could possibly look to the past of examples of this in which we've gathered information in theory for public good. So this goes back to when we started taxing people centuries ago, to a census gathering. There's all these questions of saying, what are you going to do with this information? I'm not going to give it to you, but yes, please, we need it to govern. And I think this goes back to things I was saying before about storytelling, demonstrating clear benefits, and so people can kind of understand how this information is being used. So I don't think this is a new problem. I think this goes back again and again, that if we can kind of demonstrate that we can accurately protect people's privacy, but then use that information, anonymously, to see patterns, to see themes, to then help make other decisions. That's how I believe we work through this potential conflict. And then essentially ways that we can understand are similar things of kind of, making sure we understand the track record of the people that we're providing this information to. Are they good actors? They demonstrated trust with this sort of information over time. And then I think you do need gatekeepers. This is it. Like, this is kind of this is the market. There will be people in the market that will try to leverage information to their financial benefit. And that's where I think organizations and government organizations and policymakers come in to kind of, create these boundaries over time. And that becomes the kind of the balance that we need.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, it's we demanded 20 minutes. So okay, next question is about if data analysis result is wrong. I'm curious about how to respond to this situation to get feedback and make a correction as necessary. Please answer, Mr. Kyung-Jun Lee. Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm not the data scientist.
Okay.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
and so I can give you some typical
You're developing the
answer-
data
answers
platform.
that the question is that if the data analysis result is wrong, that means that there will be two kind of scenarios. First one is if the data is incorrect, or the other scenario is if the analysis itself is incorrect. Firstly, if the data is incorrect, as I said before, there is no specific data qualification guideline in our data hub. So we should check out all kind of the process from the data creation to the delivery network, and then data warehouse and data mart or something like that. But the typical answer, just like that, it is possible by obtaining the correct data or improving the quality of data through a pre-processing process to derive the analysis result again. And the second thing is if the analysis is incorrect, that I mentioned before that everyone should has to set up or establish the purpose of the data analysis. That is most important thing, I believe, because without the kind of clear the purpose of data analysis, nobody knows what's the problem, what kind of problem are there. So typically it's kind of a typical answer that if the analysis is incorrect, you check for errors in the analysis and reanalyze through hypothesis correction and model retraining.
Okay, thank you very much. There are many questions about. Okay, the next question is for the Dr. Jung-Woo Ha. Currently, AI technology is getting special attention in the specific community due to the prolonged COVID-19 outbreak. So, and I wonder if there are any plan to apply it to new service field other than the software and the media in the future.
Thank you for the great question, but I think it is very difficult questions for the future business models. Actually, many people believe in the online will still be important after the COVID issues. So, in perspective, considering that online importance, then we can think two kind of services. One is for some B2C services. So, due to because it is not easy to the exercise in outdoor. So home training is what became very important and very popular the exercise in the nowadays. So AI can users or customers to perform the exercise in home training. The AI can modify some the pose in detail, or the AI can assist how to perform their exercise or practice in their home. And that is one issue for their healthcare. The second one is, as I mentioned, the AI can make some a good tool for the users and the small middle business owners. So actually, because we are organizing some platform, so we can provide our SME, small middle business owners, with our AI tools to make their service more richer. That means we can provide some program or tool to make their promotion video more easier, or we can give some software to the modifying or the enhancing the item images or the information kind of the description for their items. We can modify or refine the description for their goods. So these AI tools can help all the SMEs, for the small mid business players on our platform to make the promotion more convenient and more effective. I think that is our new perspective on in the online environment, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I got a question from the online. It's a very difficult question, I think. I think it's for the BSI, the David Cockle. The smart city is related to a number of the sectors like the energy, the mobility and transportation and healthcare like this. How can we integrate and facilitate the international standards for smart cities? That is a question, I think.
You're absolutely right. That is a question, a very tricky question, because cities don't exist in isolation. There's many complexities in moving parts, whether that be energy, transport, telecommunications, digital infrastructure. It's a very complex space. And I probably don't have a simple answer for you. I wish I did. I think one thing I would say is that there are many challenges for the standards bodies and those that kind of create the rules around standards, simply because of the rapid pace of change, whether that be security or technology or policy or regulation or crisis management across all the different facets that relate to cities, and just the sheer pace of change on how we can keep up with all of these factors. COVID's been a really interesting example of how we, as for example, the UK National Standards Body, has had to completely readapt the way that we develop standards and take a more flexible, dynamic approach. We published a standard for safe return to work within a matter of weeks, as opposed to months and years. And that's something we're considering very carefully about what our role is as the UK's national standards body, and what the international role of standards are in making sure we are sort of keeping up with that pace of change. And also just reflecting on some comments earlier around public and private sector sharing of data. It is complex, and I think part of the challenge is for any organization sharing data, whether that be a public or private sector, is the sheer complexity of the rules and the policy and the regulation. And I think we need to help simplify that, again, applied across those different sectors, those intersections across energy, transport, whatever that is, and look at how we support standards that are outcome based, which drive policy and regulation that are driven by outcomes for citizens. So I think that probably doesn't necessarily answer the question, because it is a very complex one. But I think what we're trying to do from a standard setting perspective is really understand how we become more dynamic and more flexible in terms of being able to reach consensus around those very important standards across all those different intersections at the pace of change that's needed by industry and by governments and by local authorities.
Okay, thank you very much. We just 9 minutes, so we are deal with the two questions. Okay, it's also the live question to the McConnell. Okay, so what opportunities are there for international collaboration on common challenges? Can I repeat?
Was it around what are some common challenges around collaboration?
So international collaboration on common challenges.
That's a good one. I think if we go down to our core of possibly as people, I think everyone wants to feel heard and feel valued. So I think that becomes something with a good process in which, you know, if you think about the kind of the typical design process, there are moments of learning, of understanding the problem, and then there are moments of kind of exploring solutions. And I think more and more, you know, we're seeing this in the way that we work, you know, in the tools that we're using even today online, is that it isn't just one group goes away, comes up with an idea, then brings it back to the other group. That's just not the way the world works anymore in any country. Everyone wants to feel a part of it, that they're contributing ideas, that they're kind of along for the ride, if you will. And if they're not, they're kind of gonna probably just not get excited about helping to solve that problem. So I think one of the ways that I think even a lot of the topics that I've heard in other speakers discuss this is coming up with methods at every stage of the process that we all feel included, that we feel that we're, maybe even techniques of drawing out introverted members of our team so they feel like they're able to share, or even members of the community so they're able to kind of express frustrations or ideas themselves. And I think that's actually something that spans, for the most part, spans the globe. People want to kind of get invested, they want to get excited. And if we're able to do that, we're actually going to realize some of these projects a lot faster than in older, antiquated ways, which were not that inclusive. So I would say to maybe kind of put a fine point on it, a challenge would be one, if we agree that these are complex challenges that require many different skill sets and integrated thinking, it's one group trying to kind of maybe dominate the solution or dominate the process over others, and the others that don't feel like they're a part of it are not going to be that invested or excited to help.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next one is it's for the Blackwell. Okay, so we faced many regulations and limitations on city data with the city stakeholders. So how can we deal with data regulation issues?
That's a really good question, and also, something flagged by David as well in his comments. So, there exists many points of friction. Regulation is one, culture, and technological barriers as well towards data sharing. So over the last 18 months or so, as part of our work on fixing the plumbing around data, we've invested a lot of time in understanding what these barriers are, including really engaging the professional community responsible for interpreting laws around data and data sharing, the information governance community, which I feel was probably a little bit of an unloved part of our public sector family. And I think that spending time with those professionals was really important, because it seemed like it was easier to say no to some data sharing rather than yes to it. So through the work of the Great London Authority and the London Office for Technology and Innovation, we've published a 6-step program on data sharing with also a high-level vision of what the mayor expects and what the municipal authorities below the mayor expect on data sharing. So for the first time, we've got a vision of what the benefits of data are, which is beyond traditional performance management, to things like stimulating innovation and giving insights and visualizing complex problems for the public. And then below that statement hang some pretty gritty but practical measures that authorities together must take. A standard way of doing data sharing agreements via a template. Usually if you want to share data, a form of data, it has been shared by someone else sometime before. So there will be a kind of a legal agreement to enable that. You don't have to start again. And we've also looked at things like we've created a system to automate the data protection impact assessments that we're required to do by GDPR. So again, this just removes cost and removes the sort of resource that previously made data sharing difficult. So in conclusion, I would say that, you know, similar to my colleagues here, is that you need that top level leadership of saying why data is important, but you also need that bottom level identification of the points of friction and set out practical measures to do that. And today we've published on the London Office of Technology and Innovation Twitter, so that's Lottie_LDN, an article on the steps that we've taken to make data sharing responsible and safe, but frictionless.
Okay, thank you very much. The last question is to the Kyungjun Lee, the SK Telecom. What is the ultimate function of Data Hub, and when will this be available to be realized technologically?
Yes, very tricky question. Yes. The purpose of the ultimate function or the function of Data Hub to be AI platform. And then, for example, SK Telecom currently has one AI platform for monitoring our mobile network. So the kind of AI platform named Tango is monitoring all kinds of things related to the mobile communication, for example, including the base station status and then communication status, data connection status, all kinds of things should be monitored by our Tango. We have spent more than 7 years to develop and build that kind of the network platform, and they spent a lot of money. So I'm not sure when the kind of the Data Hub will be available in technically. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Time is almost over. So lastly, we listen to each speakers and panel member for about just 2 minutes. Okay, so the order is from Dale Blackwell, and then Paul McConnell, and Kyungjun Lee, and Jung Woo Ha, and lastly the David Cocker. Just 2 minutes, please. Okay, last comment. Dale Blackwell.
So, I mean, I think in conclusion, what we can say is that the conception of the smarts from our various speakers, by and large, is that there's been a the concept of a smart city has been on a journey. It's incorporated in the last few years the elements of user centricity that have come from the digital transformation movement. I think we are in a situation where we're looking for much more alignment with city objectives. There's still quite a lot of work to do about how we bring data together, not just in terms of the technical challenge, but the human challenge. Because I don't really like, people use the word data driven. I don't really like that. It's data enabled, because data is only useful, I think, when put in front of human beings, and that's domain experts and data analysts, etc. So I think that how we look at the human side of data is really, really important in this, because we will get the maximum benefits for that for our citizens, which has got to be the number one priority.
Okay, the next, the Paul McConnell.
Sure. Yeah, again, thank you for having me, and great to learn from my fellow speakers and panelists. I think in summary, I feel the challenges that we're facing, especially coming out of kind of global lockdowns or rolling lockdowns, will require new methods and new solutions. And I feel that, as you can kind of hear me advocating, this combination of understanding people, understanding technology, understanding these business concerns, and this integrated thinking, it's kind of this perfect moment in which we can kind of together collaborate to help solve these problems. And I actually think it's this exciting moment for what we've been all calling the smart city movement for the last few decades. It's really kind of now. It's this great opportunity where we really need to understand data and kind of interpret it in new ways quickly, whether it's an environmental condition or environmental challenges we're facing or economic challenges. It's going to be the cities or the international organizations that can quickly take this process of interpreting, concepting new ideas, and applying them again and again and again, because as you know, cities, technology, people, we never stop. There's never a done stage, but those that can kind of quickly go through that cycle will be the ones that can best help the people that we represent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyungjun Lee.
Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. And to be honest, the concept of smart city is very difficult to me, because it's very hard to understand the meaning of smart. What's the meaning of smart? That is my problem. So as time goes by, I'd like to do my best to understand the meaning of smart, and right after that, I can do my job with my best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Jung-ha.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me here. And actually, I'm not familiar with smart city task and problem. So this symposium is a very good opportunity for me to learn the knowledge on smart city project or the issues. Actually, I think there are some similarity between smart city and AI. In particular, the ultimate goal is to aim to make human happier, I think. So I think AI can contribute to the smart city, the success of smart city. So I wish we have the opportunity to collaborate or contribute to the successful smart city project in your future. Thank you.
Thank you. The next, David Coco.
Hi. Firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's been very insightful, and I've thoroughly enjoyed all of the presentations that have been done. It's been very interesting to be involved in. I guess final reflections from me. Yes, good question. What is a smart city? I think if we got 10 people in a room, we'd probably get 10 different definitions of what it actually is. And it certainly is not just about the technology. Transformation using digital technologies is about a combination of a number of things. It's how the technology is applied to deliver an outcome for citizens and the cause and effect of those transformed services, whether they be people, process, systems, procurement, standards, whatever they are, that they're part of a complex ecosystem which allow our cities to function more effectively. And as we try and accelerate the adoption of this new technology, clearly there's going to be an increased focus on building consensus-based best practice that may or may not lead to formal standardization, but clearly best practice in how we interoperate, how we interconnect our city platforms using data technology and digital technology, and how we integrate that data is going to be quite fundamental to supporting those new ways of working and that kind of rapid growth. I guess the final comment for me, and this is often how people look at organizations like BSI, standardization is a lot more than just writing standards. It is about building and creating common, repeatable approaches, best-in-class approaches. And it's also about leveraging that knowledge to how we can work more effectively, more efficiently in a secure and trusted way. And for us, as the national standards bodies, we need to get involved earlier in those innovation cycles, not at the point where organizations feel a standard needs to be written. We need to be there when things are happening in terms of developing innovation, very much early in that innovation cycle, which is often where we're not engaged. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's time to finish this session. So, unfortunately, we had this the valuable symposium online, but I think it was very informative and meaningful time. I think that we should extend this to the big team, the worldwide, I think. So, as Paul McConnell said, the integrity team is very important. So I hope that we'll create a more concrete relationship between the UK and Korea to create a smarter city for our citizens. Thank you very much. We stop here. Okay, the third Smart City International the symposium will be concluded with the Smart City data session. Thank you to those who are interested in this event and have watched it until now. Thank you very much.
With
Thank
the
you.
closing
Have a
of
good
the
day.
Smart City Data session, all of the sessions for the third Smart City International Symposium are not finished. We've been through some difficulties in organizing this event due to the COVID-19 outbreak, but on the other hand, it brings us an opportunity to think about next steps needed to move forward after this pandemic situation. Again, we appreciate all of our guests of honor and speakers who are with us today, and also would like to express our sincere gratitude to all speakers who participated live from the UK and the British Embassy to South Korea, who gave us big support. Thank you everyone for your participation, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you.